Okay, take out your books fast.
Control and coordination खत्म नहीं हुआ ना हमारा.
Control, coordination, hormones I think I was doing.
कल टेस्ट था उसका.
हाँ?
कल टेस्ट था उसका.
तो पढ़ना तुमको है मुझे
नहीं हम यूपी में कल टेस्ट था.
हाँ, okay. तो कितना हुआ? I think only the
plant hormones वगैरह. Plant section में जाते हैं.
नहीं. This one was left. Reproductive organs was left and plant hormones was left. Take out your notebook, check. Take out your notebook. She was there. वाला नहीं आया. So was there last class. Take out your book clearly. The last endocrine gland that we had finished. We had finished with. Pituitary we have finished. After that, pancreas I have finished. Okay, let us take endocrine glands. Only one. I don't think so. Check it again. Endocrine glands. Pituitary only. Thyroid we haven't done. Thyroid not done. Thyroid done. If I remember 2-3 glands I have done. Just check and tell me. Yes. Thyroid done. So check your books now. All of you take out your notebook. Take out your volume also. Take out your volume. The endocrine glands, we have to complete with the chapter today. The endocrine glands that we were discussing. The first part of the chapter that I had discussed was the introduction of the endocrine glands. What are endocrine glands? What are their major characteristics? What are the major characteristics of endocrine glands? And we discussed that the endocrine glands are the ductless glands producing hormones, pouring hormones directly into the blood. So these were the questions. These were the concepts that we learned. Then the types of organs, the different endocrine glands that we started. The first endocrine gland that we studied was pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, the functions, the parts of the pituitary gland and the functions. What are the hormones of the pituitary gland? Number one was growth hormone, if you remember. The first one was growth hormone. This was the paper for science. Respiratory digestive and excretory. Only these two parts. And it was in on. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. वो सारे याद थे Our environment also was there. Yes, 3 chapters. Life processes and art.
That's it.
You answered which section? Genetics was there. Options were there. Which question mark? This has complete section. So you answered which one? Digestive. You answered digestive and the heritage. The pattern is changed. Biochemistry and saccharate. Saccharate.
So there are more questions for the MCQ. Question section there.
The pattern from last year they have changed a little bit. So last 2 years this is the pattern. Now this the pattern is a little bit changed, but then see the format of the question is the same. Only 3 mark, 5 mark question is the same. Only that you are getting choice now. More choice you get. That is good. More choice you are getting. Okay, let us continue. What did we study? Pituitary gland. Let me take a short revision. How much you remember? Pituitary gland. Which was the hormone which was responsible for dwarfism? Which hormone was responsible for dwarfism? Which hormone was responsible for dwarfism? Yes. Which hormone was responsible for dwarfism? What is the answer? Growth hormone. Condition responsible for dwarfism is deficiency of growth hormone. What was the location of thyroid gland? Thyroid gland location is what? Yes. What did we write? What was the location of thyroid gland? Next, what was the location we had written down? We have completed no thyroid gland. What is the location? The location, the structure, the function, abnormality. That is how I taught you. So what is the location of the thyroid to write? Yes. All the sweethearts, are you done with your looking at each other and smiling? Kitna bhar ke laayo, so much to talk. You can do during the break. No. Yes, ma'am. So ये बाकी कर background music to play. So now when we are talking about the deficiency disorders, I had taught you under 4 sections. All the 4 sections you have to remember. You'll be asked questions on structure. You'll be asked questions on the names of the hormones and their functions, and then the deficiency disorder. So I asked you, what is the hormone responsible for dwarfism? It is growth hormone. But what is the difference between dwarfism and gigantism? Gigantism is because of oversecretion. Dwarfism is because of undersecretion. The hormone remains the same. Then next is the hormone thyroxine. Hormone thyroxine. What is the source gland of thyroxine? Thyroid gland. Which element is required for the synthesis of thyroxine? Which mineral is required? Iodine. Iodine is required for the synthesis of thyroxine. Next is, you have to remember that I think we discussed that question, why people in the hilly areas. Did we discuss that question? Why people in the hilly areas have higher chances of suffering from goiter? Why people in the hilly areas have higher chances of suffering from goiter? Did we complete
The
that?
last question we did was why is pituitary gland known as the master gland?
Acha, then we haven't done thyroid. We'll have to start from thyroid. We have to start from thyroid. Let us start the thyroid gland, understanding the functions, the location, the deficiency disorder, if at all. So when we are talking about the thyroid gland, look into the points on which I talk. So those are the topics based on which you have to study also for the exam. The questions also will be framed that way. What is the name of the deficiency disorder? What are the functions? Write 2 functions. What is the source gland? What is the location? So that way. Let us start with the glands now. The first gland that we talk about now is the thyroid gland. Which endocrine gland that we talk about is the thyroid to start. See the location there that I show in that figure. So endocrine gland that we are talking about, the first one is thyroid. Location you will have to write down. The thyroid gland, the location, what are we supposed to write? Location is on either side of the trachea. Check the image there. Either side of the trachea. Where is it located? Either side of the windpipe. That is its location. Location of the gland. Next is about the structure. What about the structure of this gland? The thyroid gland, if you see, it is almost a butterfly-shaped gland. It is bilobed. It is a bilobed structure. What is the meaning of a bilobed structure? Bilobed means it is in 2 parts. It is in 2 parts. And now it is almost in the shape of a butterfly. Next is talking about the hormones and the function. We talk about what are the major hormones produced by this organ. What are the major hormones produced by the gland? Hormones, only one hormone we are studying for the thyroid gland. What is the name of the hormone? The name of the hormone is thyroxine. The name of the hormone is thyroxine. Functions. What about the major functions of this hormone? Now this hormone has 3 major functions to perform. Thyroxine, now that we talk about, has 3 major functions to perform. Number 1, it helps in the basal metabolism of the body. What is the meaning of basal metabolism? Basal metabolism actually involves a whole set of reactions taking place in the body. This is just a category name of some reactions. Within this concept, we can talk about so many other reactions or functions happening. So let us just name some of them. Basal metabolism includes what? Includes metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Apart from that, what? It also involves a process known as cellular oxidation. Cellular oxidation is a concept we had already studied. What is the meaning of cellular oxidation? Cellular oxidation. We had studied cellular oxidation. Cellular respiration we had studied. What is the meaning of cellular respiration?
Where each cell gets oxygen and carbon dioxide is
How?
The hemoglobin is the carrier for oxygen
And
carries and carbon it directly goes to the blood and goes out from the air.
cellular oxidation, cellular respiration. What is the meaning of cellular respiration?
Exchange of gases.
Life processes, that was in life processes you have studied. Respiration we have studied. Cellular respiration in respiration.
Carbon dioxide
And breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to give rise to carbon dioxide. That is cellular respiration. Remember, these are the basic concepts in respiration that you have studied. What is cellular respiration? So now that I talk about hormone thyroxine, thyroxine helps in this process also. The ready breakdown of the glucose and the release of the carbon dioxide and energy, that is also a function of thyroxine. What is the second function? The second function is development and maturation of the bones. Development and maturation of bones. Bone ossification, meaning absorption of the calcium, phosphorus, development, maturation of the bones. That is also a function of thyroxine. And at the same time, mental maturation. Mental maturation is also a function of thyroxine. So three major functions of thyroxine to remember. Basal metabolism is a concept that always you should write, you should remember. And then the development of the bone, muscles, especially the bone, and mental maturation. So these are the functions. With reference to thyroxine, something more to remember. Iodine plays an important role. What is the role of iodine here? Iodine, a mineral element, is very much necessary for the synthesis of thyroxine from the thyroid cells. So what will happen to an individual? What will happen to an individual if there is a deficiency of iodine? I talk about if there is a deficiency of iodine, what is the relation here? The deficiency of iodine will result in the deficiency of thyroxine. This will result in the deficiency of thyroxine. What is thyroxine? The primary hormone released by the thyroid gland. Deficiency of iodine in the blood will result in the deficiency of thyroxine, and this will result in an abnormal condition known as goiter. What is the most important symptom of goiter? Swelling of the lower neck. Swelling of the lower neck, apart from many other symptoms of the, or apart from many other symptoms that includes improper functioning of the body parts, functioning of the systems. A major prominent symptom that is understood in individuals suffering from this condition is goiter. What is meant by goiter? There are again other different symptoms, other different abnormalities. We are talking about the concept of goiter right now. So what is goiter? Prominent symptoms I already told you. The swelling of the lower neck. This is what generally a symptom of goiter is. This is how it appears. So now looking into, these are conditions not very serious if early diagnosis is done. Then intake of iodine and proper diagnosis, intake of iodine can minimize but not cure absolutely. Whenever we talk about any disorder associated with hormones, that can only be subsided to a certain extent, not absolutely cure. But still, out of all the other disorders, this condition, simple goiter, is comparatively less dangerous or less fatal. But there are so many other disorders also. Right now, as per your portion, we are talking about only this one, goiter. So about the thyroid gland, what is the role of iodine? Now, there's one question that you also get, that people in the mountainous regions are generally known to suffer from iodine deficiency or known to suffer from goiter. Why? The answer that you write is, when we talk about the people in the mountainous regions, they always have a deficiency of iodine in their blood because the green leafy vegetables, etc., that they eat do not have adequate amount of iodine. The soil is deficient of iodine. Also, their major source of iodine intake is just the salt. But compare when I talk about people of the coastal areas have got many sources of iodine intake. For example, the soil is rich in iodine. Coastal areas we are talking about, soil is rich in iodine. So we consume green leafy vegetables or the crops also having an adequate amount of iodine. Salt, definitely a source of iodine. On top of that, the seafood. People in the coastal areas also consume seafood. Seafood also is a good source of iodine. So that's the reason people in the coastal areas are rarely known to suffer from goiter as in comparison to people of the hilly areas, mountainous areas. We'll take that question and we move on to the next gland. Write down. People of the hilly regions, are more commonly, more commonly known to suffer, from goiter. More commonly known to suffer from goiter. Full stop, explain. Full stop, explain. Answer. The soil of the mountainous regions. Soil of the mountainous regions. Soil of the mountainous regions are deficient, C-I-E-N-T, deficient of iodine, and the only source of iodine intake, for people of mountainous regions is common salt. People of mountainous regions is common salt. Full stop. In contrast, soil in the coastal areas are rich in iodine. Soil in the coastal areas are rich in iodine. And the sources of iodine intake for people in this region are green leaves or green leafy vegetables, seafood, and common salt. Thus, they do not commonly suffer from pyroxene deficiency. Now, next is we talk about the pancreas. A concept of pancreas that is known to you is pancreas releasing enzyme. So this concept of the pancreas is already known to you. Now we are going to study the other concept of pancreas, that is pancreas, a endocrine gland. We have already studied in the concept of digestion. Life processes, the first part. Digestion, whenever we studied, we already studied that pancreas produces variety of enzymes, the trypsin, etc. So now we are not talking about those enzymes, rather we are talking about now the hormones. So let us start understanding in all these points. First of all, the location of the gland. What is the location seen here in that figure? I am showing you the correct location of the pancreas. The pancreas, whenever in the figure, in most of the figure, the pancreas is always marked between the stomach and the small intestine, but actually when you see behind the stomach. So actually the correct location of the pancreas is as such because the stomach and the intestine, they are very close. And right from the front, if you see, we can only see a part of the pancreas, and the major part of the pancreas is just at the back of the stomach. So what should be right as the location? What is the location of the pancreas? The location of the pancreas always to be written is behind the stomach. That is the appropriate location that is written behind the stomach. Let us talk about the structure of the gland, pancreas. Pancreas is one exceptional gland. It is only one special gland in our body which produces both enzymes and hormones. So this particular gland that we understand is both exocrine and endocrine. So structurally it has got two types of cells. One group of cells capable of producing the enzymes and the other group of cells capable of producing hormones. Now we are talking about the endocrine cells. The cells which are endocrine in nature, what type of hormones do they produce? Now the type of hormones that the pancreas produce are majorly two types. So let us try understanding the major two hormones. What are the two hormones majorly? One is insulin and there is one more hormone known as glucagon. Try understanding the two major hormones of the pancreas, insulin and glucagon. What is the job of the insulin? Exocrine, just now as I said, these are those group of cells which will be releasing the enzymes. Enzyme secreting cells are exocrine, they will be carried by tubes, ducts. Endocrine, they will not be carried by tubes, ducts, but directly poured into the blood. So now, to understand the concept of these endocrine glands, let me put it very simple, try to understand. I'm talking about the blood stream. Why? Why suddenly we talk about the bloodstream? Because I understand that the endocrine gland, any endocrine gland, they will pour their hormones directly into the bloodstream. So now I talk about a specific gland, and which is this gland right now? I think of the pancreas. Also, try to understand the relation one with the other. I am talking about the bloodstream. Why? Trying to understand that what would be the job of the insulin and the glucagon from time to time. Now, right after any food, say suppose I start this way, try understanding, right after food, whenever we consume any meal, you have eaten your breakfast, you have eaten your lunch, you have eaten your dinner, where adequate amount of carbohydrate is there. Or maybe right now during the break, you eat an adequate amount of carbohydrate. So at any part of the day, whenever we are eating an adequate amount of carbohydrate, and after that, within 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, what is happening in our body? The food is getting digested. So what are the steps? You know already. Digestion, absorption, assimilation. So now if I still only talk about absorption, I said we ate some food rich in carbohydrate. After that, the process of digestion, absorption is supposed to happen. So absorption definitely means that the glucose has been poured into the blood by the way of the villi, if you remember. So now absorption has happened, meaning from the villi, glucose have entered into the blood. So after food, if we go for a blood test, within 2 hours, what is expected? The glucose concentration of the blood will be high. I repeat what I am saying. After any proper meal with an adequate amount of carbohydrate, within 2 hours, when you go for a blood test, the glucose concentration is definitely found to be high. But now, surrounding the blood vessels, let me also find out what should be there. I assume, and it is not assumption, it is true. Surrounding the blood vessels, what is there? The body cells. Okay, now the glucose is there in the blood. After food, within 2 hours, we go for the blood test. We get to see the glucose concentration very high. But we repeat the test now again after 2 more hours. We repeat the test after 2 more hours, meaning 9 o'clock you eat your food and take the test almost about 12 o'clock. So after having the food 9 o'clock and then taking the test, if it is 11 o'clock, concentration very high. But we repeat the test again at 12 or 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you repeat the test. Now what the situation is? Now the situation is the insulin is produced. There is so much of insulin in the blood now. Since there is insulin in the blood, the glucose has started moving towards the body cells. Since there is insulin in the blood, the glucose has started moving to the body cells and the glucose in the blood has started decreasing. Are you understanding what I am saying? I said we had food and in 2 hours time when you go for a blood test, the glucose concentration is always high. But again when we repeat the blood test in another 2 hours time, meaning 4 hours from food now it is found that the glucose concentration is no more high but it has decreased. Then what has happened in this 1.5 hour period? The body cells have started picking up glucose from the blood. What has happened in this 1.5 period? The body cells have started picking up glucose from the blood and now the body cells are picking up glucose. Here the glucose concentration is decreasing. Here the glucose is more. So what will happen to the glucose in the body cells? The glucose in the body cells will be broken down and enough amount of energy will be released, which is a normal process. So if insulin is there in the blood, body cells will readily pick up all the glucose from the blood and the body cells are breaking down the glucose, energy is released. The blood now has lesser amount of glucose. So what is the function for insulin? Then we should write. What is the function of insulin? What function should we write for insulin then? The job of the insulin is to do what now? It has been lowering the blood glucose level. What is the job of insulin? It is lowering the blood glucose level. How did it lower the blood glucose level? By allowing body cells absorb the glucose. And also, every time now that we eat food and the carbohydrate, we actually eat carbohydrate much more than what our body just needs. So that means the blood always has extra glucose left. What will happen to that extra glucose? You have studied in life processes. What happens to the extra glucose? What happens to the extra glucose? It is stored. It is stored in what form? Where? It is stored. Huh? How to make? It is stored where? We have studied all these things, life process, digestion, absorption, fate of glucose, that was the last part of absorption. What happens to the surplus glucose which is still remaining in the blood?
Converted into fats and then stored
Near the?
no, fat liver.
It is stored in the liver.
Fatty liver.
In the form of?
Fatty acids.
Fatty acids we haven't taught in your portion. I did not teach you in your portion.
Fatty
What
liver.
I taught.
Fatty liver is different.
Fatty liver, you must have heard from somebody and he is talking of fatty liver. Fatty liver is not there in your portion. That is true. That is true. That excess glucose gets. That is true. But what is there in your portion? That you tell me now. What was the major point that we had studied? Excess glucose gets converted to glycogen in the liver. Remember that? Excess glucose gets that conversion of fat. That part is also true if you write no hard. But now I said try to understand the relation. I said number one, Glucose enters the blood in large amount. If insulin is there in the blood now in adequate amount, what will happen? Insulin will allow the absorption of the glucose into the body cells. Insulin is allowing the absorption of glucose into the body cells, so glucose concentration in the blood is decreasing and it should decrease. That is the job of insulin. So what do you write? What is the job of insulin? Lowering blood glucose level. What is the function of insulin? It lowers the blood glucose level. That's the major function to write. But how does it lower the blood glucose level? Two major pathways you are supposed to know. Which are the two major pathways? It allows the absorption of glucose. It absorbs the glucose from the blood by the body cells. It absorbs or helps in the absorption of glucose from the blood by the body cells. So this is one way. And the second that already we had studied with life processes also, the excess or the surplus glucose is converted to glycogen. All of you will write these points. Later you don't remember anything. Excess glucose is converted to glycogen in the liver. Glycogen in the liver. So these are the two pathways how insulin lowers the blood glucose level. You get questions? How does insulin lower the blood glucose level? These are the 2 points to write. How does insulin lower the blood glucose level? Number one, insulin helps body cells to pick up, absorb glucose from the blood. Whatever excess glucose, convert them to glycogen. Where should that process deposition of excess glucose happens? In the liver. So always remember this. So this is the normal process which is every day happening in our body. We have our breakfast at 1 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, and after that if by 12 o'clock we go for a blood test, this is the situation, blood glucose level normal. We have our dinner by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 8:30, whatever time, 8:30. After 3 hours, go for a blood test. This will be the situation. Meaning, blood glucose level will be very low. Which hormone is responsible for lowering the blood glucose level? Insulin always. How does it do this job? By these two major pathways. One is excess glucose stored in the form of glycogen to be used later. We'll come to this. And allow the body cells to pick up glucose. Should the body cells pick up glucose? Yes, normally it should pick up the glucose. Why? Then only the cells will be able to break down glucose, release energy. But if a person has a very low amount of insulin in the body, now what? If a person has a very low or a deficiency of insulin in the body, then let us try understanding what would the condition be. If a person has a deficiency of insulin, now tell me, if a person has a deficiency of insulin after 4 hours, 5 hours or 6 hours even, are we going to understand the blood glucose concentration? Will it be low? Understand what I'm asking you. I'm saying under all normal conditions, you eat food at 11, go for a test at 2 o'clock, your blood glucose level should be low. Meaning normal it should be. But for a person, it is found that a person had his breakfast by 9 o'clock, and then by 11 o'clock when he goes for the blood test, then also the blood glucose level high. He repeats the test again at 3 p.m. Then also the blood glucose level high. What must have happened in his body? In his body, insulin is much lesser, deficient है, इसीलिए blood में glucose remaining as it is, and this process of absorption is not happening. So he is taking the blood test after 2 hours, after 3 hours, after 6 hours. हमेशा blood glucose level is still high. तो problem क्या हो रही है? Problem is body cells are not able to pick up glucose from the blood. इसीलिए blood में glucose concentration persistently high है. तो प्रॉब्लम कौन से हार्मोन में है? Which gland? The gland is pancreas, which is defectively producing, or the secretion of insulin is less. So if the secretion of insulin is less, the concentration of glucose in the blood will be always high. Concentration of glucose in the blood. Concentration of glucose in the blood always very high, and this condition is known as diabetes mellitus. What is this condition? Remember the name. What is this condition known as? Diabetes mellitus. What is happening to this person? The person is always having a very high concentration of glucose. The person is always having a very high concentration of glucose in the blood. Whether we talk about 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours after food, वही same high concentration है. Reason, state the reason. What will you write? Deficiency of insulin. So this person is not showing any of these processes. What are the symptoms of this person? Symptoms of this person, will this person be very energetic? A person has insulin deficiency. Will this person be very energetic? Yes or no? Not at all, because body cells में glucose नहीं पहुंच रहा है. Body cells are always having a small amount of glucose. So where is the glucose to burn and produce energy? Body cells doesn't have adequate energy. What are some of the symptoms of this person? Diabetes. When we talk about few symptoms, 1 or 2 major symptoms. Frequent urination is one. High blood glucose already mentioned. And this person is always weak or lethargic. Toshita, sit straight. So now when we are talking about weakness and lethargy, lack of energy is a major symptom that the person will suffer from. A person suffering from diabetes is always exhausted, tired, frequent urination. They feel thirsty also at the same time, that's why. So these are some. You get questions in your paper where there may be some assertion or there may be some descriptive case study questions also at times. So a person is suffering from extreme weight loss and frequent urination. What is the disorder he is suffering from? Diabetes mellitus. Which hormone is responsible for this disorder? Insulin. Deficiency of insulin hormone, responsible is insulin. Which gland? Pancreas. So this is the basic understanding when we talk about insulin. Normally what? And deficient what? Now let us talk about the other side, normally again. I say for normal individuals, I come back again to the normal concept. We have already understood about diabetes. Why diabetes? What is the symptom? What is the reason? Now, again, something more I say is under regular conditions. Again, I go back to the regular condition. We had food, the process of digestion, absorption happening, glucose come into the bloodstream. Now the glucose come into the bloodstream. The moment the process of digestion, absorption is happening, glucose is entering into the bloodstream. What will happen? The hormone insulin will be released. And now insulin starts doing this job. Now what insulin will do is, insulin will take all the body cells, will allow absorption of all the glucose. So under normal conditions, when the insulin is released into the blood and this process is going on, yes, after some 2-3 hours, the condition of the blood is something like this. Blood glucose concentration almost becoming low and almost touching the barrier, meaning almost touching the threshold. So now, when we eat food, almost about 5 hours, after 5 hours, 4, 5, 6 hours, this is almost the situation in our body. The body cells have picked up glucose, the blood is almost becoming lesser and lesser and lesser of glucose. But by the time when the glucose concentration almost touches the optimum level, at the time a specific hormone known as glucagon starts getting released. Why? because the blood glucose has decreased so much, and if it now falls beyond the regular normal level, the body will again start suffering from symptoms. What are those symptoms? The body will start shivering. The patient, the individual, not the patient, the individual may start having some giddiness, nausea, vomiting, meaning when the glucose concentration in our blood drops, it is even more dangerous. Because the brain, the heart should get adequate supply of energy from the breakdown of glucose. So if the glucose supply to the cell and the energy supply to the muscles and the brain stops, even more dangerous. So how does our body constantly do those functions of maintaining a regular glucose level? Now that I talk about that, when the glucose concentration in our blood becomes much lower and lower and lower, now glucagon gets released. So at that time, there will be one more hormone entering the blood, and what is the name of that hormone? Glucagon. But what is this hormone doing? This hormone is now raising up the blood glucose level. This is doing the function just opposite what insulin did. Raising the blood glucose level. How does it do this? By the breakdown of glycogen to glucose. By the breakdown of glycogen to glucose, and then release the glucose into the bloodstream. That is what the glucagon does. So I said, when the blood glucose almost starts falling, almost touching the threshold, which hormone will be produced? Now glucagon, trying to raise the glucose level up. How will it raise the glucose level up? In the liver, break down this glycogen to glucose. Can you tell me which part of the day this process happens in our body every day? This process, breakdown of the glycogen to glucose and then entering of the glucose into the blood and to maintain the glucose level, this process happens in our body almost every day. Can you tell me when? During the night. Yes, during the night we eat our dinner and then the next breakfast, minimum 10 hours of gap always for all of us. Minimum 10 hours of gap almost for all of us, but the glucose going to the blood in hardly 2 hours, getting inside the body cells in hardly another 2-3 hours. Then what about those 3-4 hours left? What is happening in those 3-4 hours? We are not eating anything. How does the body maintain that glucose level? Now the next morning when we get up, are we energetic, fresh, or we are almost drained out with our energy? We are drained out with our energy morning when we get up? No, not at all. When you not that. Drained out with our energy means in the morning when you get up, are you able to get up and keep doing your activities? Yes. Wash our face, that's a different story. That is what you are feeling drowsy little bit. When we are
3 to 4 times every day, every morning.
What?
I fall 3 to 4 times every morning.
I
fall every day 3 to 4 times in the morning. Because I don't know. I'm standing up,
and you fall. At night you are not watching movies late night, no?
No.
Studying late night?
Maximum 12, 15.
12 is okay for a 10 standard student. Why should you fall by then?
Yeah.
That is really weird. You should not fall. Morning when you get up, you should be energetic.
Doesn't happen because we stay up till late night.
12 o'clock is not late for
No,
a 10 standard.
not 12 o'clock, but if we stay awake for
You may fall if there is generally what are the reasons for falling down. Now, I don't know, I don't believe what he says, but he must be watching some of those fictions. 10 standard we do know.
Everyone is just
Huh?
तो सिर्फ डोरेमोन ही देखता हूँ
10th स्टैंडर्ड में कौन डोरेमोन देखता है क्या कोई? हाँ? You also? हाँ। 10th स्टैंडर्ड में कौन देखता है?
Ma'am, he is a very big fan of it.
फिक्शन देखना बंद करो, नहीं तो इधर उधर भीगते रहोगे।
वो तो खाली
मैं नैट जियो देखता हूँ
That still sounds better. ये जो अभी जो 10th स्टैंडर्ड का सिलेबस पढ़ रहे हो ना, I think all of you want to study science in the 11th. कौन कॉमर्स पढ़ रहा है? Studying commerce. Anyways, I think for commerce also the story is the same. जो 10th में है और जो 11th में है, there's a long gap. So 10th में जो पढ़ रहे हो उसके साथ थोड़ा extra पढ़ो. Okay, so now come back to the topic. I said, at what period of the day this process is necessary? Always remember when we take long breaks between food. Between meals, when we take long breaks, at that time, this process or the job of glucagon is necessary. Because when the glucose level is less and less and less in the blood, if the glucose level is not raised up, we may start suffering from trembling or nausea or sudden vomiting, and this may affect our vital organs. As just now I mentioned, lowering of the blood glucose is even more dangerous than shooting up of the blood glucose, a condition known as diabetes that we understood just now. Then how does the body maintain the glucose level every time? Whenever the glucose level little bit lower and almost touching the threshold, the glucagon starts breaking down the glycogen in the liver, releases glucose into the blood. So that is the reason when we take long breaks between food, especially night every day. So every night we generally have from dinner to next breakfast a gap of minimum 9-10 hours. That is the time when the glucagon does its job. When we go fasting for long periods, quite a number of times we go fasting for half a day, one complete day, not adequate amount of carbohydrate we eat, but still we are able to do our job almost the entire day. How is it possible? At that time the glucagon does its job of breaking down the glycogen to glucose and release it in the blood. So this way, at least 2-3 days our body can carry on with the muscular activity without an adequate amount of carbohydrate intake. So disorder related with this, only one we are studying right now, diabetes. So now, can we write that glucagon and insulin, they are opposite in their functions? Are they opposite in their functions? Insulin is lowering the blood glucose and glucagon is raising up the blood glucose. You get a 1-mark question at times. Name the hormone responsible for maintaining the blood glucose level. What is your answer? Maintaining. जब ज्यादा हो रहा है उसको कम करना है, जब बहुत कम हो गया उसको ज्यादा करना है. So which hormone will be responsible? Insulin and glucagon both. Answer: insulin and glucagon both. So since these hormones have opposite functions, I think there's a question in your volume also. Since these hormones have opposite functions, they are also known as antagonistic. Why are they known as antagonistic hormones? Because they show opposite functions. We'll take one question here, right up. Insulin and glucagon. These points you will have to write. In the volume also we have given specific points to answer questions. Read properly. See that you understand. If not, you'll have to raise your questions. See that you clarify, understand. Insulin and glucagon are antagonistic hormones. Right on? Insulin and glucagon are antagonistic hormones. Glucagon. What is the difference between glucagon and glycogen?
Lowering the blood glucose.
What is the difference between glucagon and glycogen? Glucagon is a you all are not understanding at all, except for 1 or 2. Not understanding. What is the everything I am writing on the what is the difference between glucagon and glycogen? Glucagon is what? Glucagon is what? What is glucagon?
Glucagon is stored.
What is glucagon? What is glucagon?
Return of glycogen.
Your answer should be like this. What is glucagon? It is a hormone which raises up the blood glucose level. What is glycogen? What is glycogen?
Lowering the blood.
What is glycogen? The
stored
stored form of excess glucose in the liver. It is the stored form of excess glucose in the liver. ये भी question आता है. What is the difference differentiate between glucagon and glycogen and their functions? Okay, let us complete this question. Insulin and glucagon are antagonistic hormones. Go fast. Explain. Antagonistic hormones. ANTAGONISTIC. Antagonistic मतलब जो भी muscle है function are opposite. Hormones है functions opposite. Enzymes है function opposite. They are always known as antagonistic. Write down the answer. Insulin lowers the blood glucose level. Insulin lowers the blood glucose level by storing excess glucose in the form of glycogen in the liver. In the liver. Full stop. When the glucose concentration is very low in the blood, when the glucose concentration is very low in the blood, when the glucose concentration is very low in the blood, glucagon is released. Glucagon is released into the blood. Full stop. Glucagon breaks down. Glucagon breaks down the glycogen in the liver to glucose. Breaks down glycogen in the liver to glucose and released into the bloodstream. And released into the bloodstream, thus raising up the blood glucose level. Thus raising up the blood glucose level. Okay. So these are the major glands we are done. I think we are left with only one adrenal gland there and the reproductive glands. And the hormones for the plants not much, only 5 major hormones and 1 function. We'll continue next.
बर्थडे गिफ्ट कैसा लगा?
क्या दिया?
बैग दिया।
अभी तेरा बर्थडे हो गया? नहीं हुआ यार। इसका बर्थडे हो गया क्या? अरे तेरे को गिफ्ट देगा ना? गिफ्ट देता हूँ। देख बताओ।
अरे बच्चा
तो क्या हुआ? देखिए वो।
अरे ये ना
ये पकड़ तो नहीं ना